So when it comes to getting any kind of decent range out of an antenna or adding any kind of significant gain into double figures, you'll be hard pressed to actually beat the simple satellite dish method. Now, I've done videos previously on parabolas and how even a small parabola can add a significant gain and range to an antenna, rather than having just a normal kind of flat reflector, but having a parabolic curve reflector. So this I actually made probably over a year ago now, and I actually threw it together in an afternoon, and I have used it quite a few times, but I want to actually build it again, because there are a few mistakes that I made on this that I've just thought to myself, if I ever make this again, then I'll change a couple of things that I did to this original one. So if we have a quick look at this one, then what I've got here is some simple Velcro to hold the two wings together, and what I've got here is some washers along the side, and the actual arms of the satellite dish, for example, actually fold up and go into the little slots on the washer, and then we've got some springs at the back that holds it in position, and same with the second one. So you actually get a fully working and erect satellite dish that you can actually use, and then obviously when you finish with it, you can actually fold it back down again to a small footprint and throw it in the boot of your car or put it in a carry holder. So let's get the tools out then, and I'll show you how to actually make a folding satellite dish. So what I've got on the bench here is a typical satellite dish that's actually mass produced here in the UK, and I particularly like this one because I do like its shape. It's got these two butterfly wings at the sides, so you've got this elliptical shape going on, and you've also got some perforated holes in this, so it does make it a little bit lighter, and we can also use those holes to actually guide where we're going to mark and actually cut the satellite dish. So the first thing I'm going to do is bolt the arm onto the satellite dish, because where it actually bolts on, this is going to help us guide where we're going to mark and actually cut this dish. So to mark out the lines for this dish, what I actually want to do is cut the line here buttered up against the side of this bracket here, and then come all the way down here and actually go under this bracket here. So this particular part of the bracket is going to overlap slightly, so under there and all the way down. You can also use the holes in this satellite dish to help guide you, but I find it easier if you use a bit of masking tape and just butt it up against that side there, and then just lay it down, work your way down, and then you'll get a nice straight line all the way to the end. So now that we've got the masking tape in place, I've removed the bracket, as you can see, so we can get in there with the cutting wheel, and I'm just going to use a simple Dremel tool here with one of these little cutting wheels on the end, and you're probably going to need about 4 of those wheels to do all the cutting on this. And to make it a little bit easier, what I've found is if you cut one side but leave the two edges here until last, it's just a lot easier to actually manage, because once you cut one of these sides away, it does lose a little bit of its structural integrity, so leave the edges till very last. So as you can see, I've cut all the way through now, and I've also gone down the edges with some emery paper just to round the edges off a little bit and get rid of any sharp pieces on there. And I've also numbered the panels now as well, so I can't get the two ends mixed up. So what I'm actually going to do now is fit the arm back onto this centre panel. So what we're going to do now, we're going to add these washers down the middle piece here like I have in the original one. And this one is actually held in place with the original fixing screw, but these two, we're going to have to use 2 washers and some nuts and bolts to actually hold them in place here and here. And what that does, because it's sandwiched either side of the thickness of the dish itself here, we can actually fit this part of the dish in between there, and it does a really good job of holding it in position. So I'm using these washers here that I've got in the shop, and these are actually 10mm diameter, so you could probably do with using something a little bit bigger, maybe about 12mm diameter, but because the hole is a bigger diameter than this screw that's holding this down here. I'm just going to give it a push to one side as I tighten down on this screw. And that way we've got a decent surface area there for the actual side of the satellite dish to slip in between. So for the next washer, I'm going to have to drill a hole through there to attach it with this small nut and bolt here. But what I'm going to be doing is very similar to the middle one, but this time using two washers to sandwich together, so we've got that gap, so the other blade of the dish there can actually fit in between, and it does a really good job of actually holding it in place. But on the original one I forgot to take into account this bracket, so I got it a little bit crooked. But this time just make sure that if you're using a similar dish to me, then you do it quite far down at the bottom so you're not hitting this bracket here. So now we've got all the washers in place, what I'm going to move on to now is the actual hinges or the brackets that I use to actually be able to fold these two sides of the satellite dish up like two wings. So in the first one that I built, I actually used some Meccano pieces to construct these hinges, but it wasn't really up to the job because it wasn't substantial enough. But this time I'm using these straight brackets. You can buy them pretty cheap in packs of 4 for less than £1. And what I've actually done is cut one of them in half like this, and I've actually drilled an extra hole in the ends here as well, and then I've actually riveted them together with a washer in the middle to actually make this little hinge mechanism here. So what happens with these then, when they're actually riveted in place, they actually pivot there, they pivot in the middle, and they also pivot on this axis here when that's actually riveted to the main body. So we can get that lifting effect where it'll lift out and then it'll actually hinge in and then it'll lift down again. So it's a really simple way of doing it, and these brackets don't cost a lot of money at all. So when it comes to actually mounting these little hinges, I want to mount them pretty close together, something like that, so we can actually stretch it out and actually move it around to actually fold it up, so you've got that quite a big gap there, and then pull it apart and then move it in again to bring the satellite dish together. And also this outer edge on the spring here, I'm going to be actually putting a bolt through there to link up one of these springs, so both hinges on the top here are connected with this spring. Now I got this spring off eBay, and it's actually a 90mm spring, but you could also get them off those old type of lamps, those reading lamps. This one is off quite an old lamp. You can see it's quite rusty, but it still actually does the job. So I've got the first leg of this hinge actually riveted in, but because of the way I've made this hinge, you've got the thickness of this first leg here to take into consideration. If I just riveted this side directly onto the dish itself, it would actually be slightly twisted. So I've got one of these little nylon washers just to raise it up slightly so it's more flush against the side of the dish itself. So there you can see now I've riveted it on with the nylon washer. It actually lays quite flat now along that side. So now I'm just going to do the same to the remaining 3 corners. So I've got the hinges in place now, and I've got it all together. As you can see, I haven't put these springs in yet, but you know, it's doing a pretty good job of holding it all together just with the 3 washers down each side. But you know, if you've got access to some kind of welding tools, etc., you could probably come up with something even better than that. And one little mistake, I forgot to take into consideration the outer diameter of the head of this little bolt here, so I've had to drill 2 new holes there to actually mount the spring in place. So to hold the spring in place, I've just got the bolt there, I've got a nut locking it down onto the bracket itself, then 2 nylon washers, and the spring is sandwiched in the middle, and then another locking nut down on top of there, and it's doing a good job of holding it in place. And what's really good about this particular design of satellite dish is it uses these little plastic LMB holders here that are designed to go on this arm, and if you ground out the little notches that will normally notch onto there, it's really easy to put this on and off, and you can buy these for around £1, £1.50, so you can actually modify them for different antennas. So to finish it off then, I would definitely give it a coat of paint, especially where you've been cutting the dish, otherwise it will rust. And a little bit of double-sided Velcro on there just to hold the two halves together when it's folded up. So I hope you enjoyed that video and you have a go at making one of these. It only takes probably about an afternoon's worth of work, and no real specialist tools. You just need a Dremel and a little bit of patience. So any questions, just drop them below, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, and hopefully you'll join me for the next one.